Swiss plan their vacation 2 years ahead. When they want to see friends, actually, they take appointments. One of the things we're really proud of is that we have so many insurances. Here's my insurance card. We have insurances for life, as you do, for households, but we also have insurances for cars, for bikes, for small bikes, big bikes. We have insurances for cars and for our dogs, for children, for grandparents. We have insurances for everything. We plan ahead and we want to make sure one thing sure, which is that we're safe. If there's one situation where you're not safe is actually when you stand in front of people. This is not safe. So when I prepared this a few months ago, Ashley asked me if I wanted to do this. I said, of course I can. Presentation, I'm going to talk about filing team in action. It's a really good product. And it was a fantastic co-creation effort. But the point about filing team in action was I thought I can wing this somehow. And I love TED Talks. So I heard about this guy, Tim Burton, who talked about, here's the second part of my confession, procrastination. He spends 20 minutes talking about procrastination and how he spends time going to the fridge, getting some food, sitting down at the laptop, starting with the slide deck, getting another coffee. And in my case, I had a chat with Ashley last week on Wednesday. So I promised her to send the slides the very same day. But I didn't. Comes Thursday. I started really sitting down, but then I was a little bit tired. My daughters came home and they asked me to bring them somewhere. And in the US, of course, distances are big, so I made her that favor. And I came back, sat down at the laptop. I felt like you. I was so tired, I couldn't continue, but there was still Friday. And on Friday, I thought, you know what the good news is? There's still a weekend. I'm going to do this on Saturday. So I sat down on Saturday and spent about 8 hours coming up with these slides. And the moment I wanted to press the button to send them to Ashley, I thought, 9 hours of flight. Still time on Sunday. So I spent a few more hours really on Sunday. And on Sunday evening, I would send the slide deck to Ashley, and she hopefully was really happy. But I hadn't rehearsed anything. And how you feel when you haven't rehearsed and you stand in front of people. But I thought about this other TED Talk when the guy talks about TED Talk-like presentations. You know what he says? 3 strategies to prepare for these kind of talks. The first one is that you wing it. I'm not going to do that. It's not in my nature. The second one is that you have a clear structure and you actually take the time to rehearse carefully. You follow a script, you may read it just simply as that. Or you take extensive time really to rehearse. I didn't have that time. And sometimes you're not going to have that time as well. You know what happens then? You find yourself somewhere here in between. Either you wing it, and it's not difficult, it doesn't feel good. Or you're in between and really take the time to read off the script. Well, that's boring. It's pretty safe. Or you have something in between, which is the barely memorized rehearsal I've done. Now that one is really scary. The only way to get there is when you have your next presentation, have a look at that TED Talk and think about the 2 key aspects you want to consider as much as I do. One is planning, and the other is somehow find the entry point into your presentation. And that's what I've done. So here's my story. In 2013, we had a leadership offsite. And it was the first leadership offsite where this team would come together. And Liz was the sponsor of the project that was born at that very time. It was in Montreux. It's a beautiful place. You're right next to the lake. It really helps you to think through things. And we wanted to move that leadership team from individual leaders to become a real cohesive leadership team. We looked at strategy. We looked at the ways of working, and we had the level of self-disclosure that was really encouraging. So I thought, good glass of wine in the evening, you do have a good moment with these people, and I can spend a little bit of time what you would do as well as a learning expert. You educate them on building a curriculum. And that's what I did. The very next day, we spent about 4 hours unplanned coming up with good ideas about how that program may look like. And here's the pain points we identified at that time. we realized that we had a lot of quality issues in some of our filings. That's what our people do. They file medications to health authorities. And quality issues are not good. And then we had gaps in understanding. We realized many of these people who are part of the filing teams do not have the knowledge they should have to do a good job. So they struggle. And then we had behavioral issues as well. We realized that people collaborate sometimes 24/7 to make sure a medication has quicker access to markets for patients. And that's demanding. So they work a lot. And of course, that may create sometimes behavioral issues. Now, here's our vision. That very day, we thought, we want to, of course, enhance the quality of our submissions, but at the same time, we want to make sure that these teams can work effectively, but also sustainable. Before I show you the 6 steps I've taken in that process, I want to do a mini MBA in drug development, because that may help you to understand a few things about medications. Now, what you see on the left-hand side is one of the products, and this is not ours, it's just an example. And when you take a medication because you may, or someone may have a disease as a patient, or you have a headache and you want to reduce your pain, one of the things you look at is actually the prescription and the warning signals as well, all the secondary effects. What our people do in regulatory affairs is they make sure that you are safe and that I'm safe as a patient. But they also want to make sure that the medication really is effective. It makes a difference. It makes a difference for you when you have a pain, or it makes a difference when you suffer from a disease. That's what they do. So drug development is a long, complex process. This is a simplified version, really. Imagine someone has a baby, and that's a molecule, and spends a few days and a few years in research, really, to find out if that molecule is effective. Maybe to cure or make progress in curing depression, or maybe some other disease you can think of. At one point in time, that molecule is handed over to the clinical research, the clinical development, excuse me. So our people, what they do is they gather a lot of clinical data by figuring out how patients react to that new molecule. They start with a few, and then there's hundreds and thousands of patients we try to get data from, and at one point in time, we decide to file. And when that filing decision happens, a team is put together, and that team is called filing teams. The global filing team is in charge of the whole process, and there's governance around it, so there's a lot of iterative loops with clinical governance committees, commercial governance committees, and so on, but everything is driven by teams. And the global filing team, what they need to do is they constantly interact with clinical teams, commercial teams, governance bodies, and health authorities. So it's very complex. Do you know how long that takes? Do you have any sense of how long it takes to develop a drug to market? 10 years, 12 years. That's exactly the point. It is over 12 years that it takes from discovery of a molecule to access the market and make it available to patients. 12 years. The global filing team is in charge of that last chunk of 18 months. And what they do is they, of course, have pressure, because once you have the data and you realize this could be a new medication for someone, well, then everyone is interested and excited about it. So these 18 months are very intense, and sometimes they're also stressful. Here's how global filing teams look like. It's a composition of leaders from different functions. They're statisticians, they're clinicians, they're project managers, and they all work together. And they do that by representing their function. So while the core team may be 15 people, we talk about up to 40 people as part of the extended team. And if it's a big indication, you may have 200 people working on one medication at the same time. Imagine the complexity. All of these teams are global, they're virtual, which means they work across time zones between China and Europe and the US, and they work with technologies because they meet maybe twice a year, and the rest is virtual. Here's what they do. They drive the process of these filings for access to markets. They drive the strategy, figuring out what countries first, where's the biggest need. They manage all these stakeholders, the governance committees, the health authorities, and they're remote. That means they have to have skills to collaborate, to communicate well, but also to influence people from a distance. They're not co-located. And at the end, they have to be agile and resilient because there's always changes in new regulations, and new demands in the environment. What you see on the right-hand side below is what we call the global dossier. This is the end product, the deliverable. Do you know how many pages that has? One of these clinical summaries can have up to 10,000 pages. We currently have one of the filings that consists of 46 of these summaries. You can make the math and figure out how much it takes really to drive that team with all of these stakeholders over time. So here's our learning journey and how I try to approach and figure out how we can make that complex process somehow available and translated into a learning product. We did start in Montreux, figured out what the pain points are, and realized that the medical writers are stressed out because of the situation. It took me a few weeks or even months to even understand what the DNA of those global filing teams is. We're a science-driven company, so DNA drives what we do, and I think the same as a psychologist. I do think the same about teams. What's their dynamics? How do they work together? What's leadership about in this remote environment? And one of the things I learned is that there's 50% of these people who have never done a filing before. Do you know why? It takes 12 years. So in your career, you may have done 1 or maybe 2 or 3 of these filings, and that's it, because it takes so long. So of course we will have people who don't have experience with it. It took me a few more weeks to really come up with something I like, being conceptual. Takeuchi and Nonaka came up in 1984 with a model that shows you the knowledge creation cycle. It shows you that most of the knowledge we have, of course, is implicit. Your meeting is late, and your newcomer learns very quickly that he or she can come late to your meetings, because your meetings are always late. They internalize, through observing actually, what the kind of knowledge is you have in your team. But there's also the external part, and the question is, how do you get to that part that you can share and make it available and scale to everyone? So what I did is I ran a number of workshops, some of them virtual, some of them face-to-face, with about 70 subject matter experts we got together from all over the world. And I got a lot of data. And it took me a few months really to digest, even over Christmas and after Christmas. And in the meantime, I had found an external partner who worked with me on this to have more resources available. So in February, we had a blueprint idea of how that program may look like based on all these facts that we found. And then a few weeks later, we were still doing iterative loops because each team we were talking to told us something different. It took a bit more time here. The issue was slightly different with one of the stakeholders. They were struggling with different things. So we spent weeks and weeks and weeks figuring out how close we could get to reality of that complex process. We did walkthroughs, dry runs, pilots, until at the very point in time, our senior people became nervous and said, "You guys have been working on this such a long time. I'm not sure you've chosen the right partner." It didn't make me feel comfortable, I can tell you. So that very day, I called our travel agency, booked a flight to the UK, spent about 2 days talking to my external partner and said, "Do you know what? I trust you. I know we're going to get this right. We spent already 7 months on this, so let's figure out how we can simplify it and really making it successful." And we did. In November 2014, we did launch this product globally in Europe and the US to about 50 people. And it was still a pilot because we realized this is a process where there's ongoing learning. There's so much knowledge out there that we need to acquire, but it was a successful launch. Today, it's a well-established blended program, and I wanted to show you how that looks like by sharing a quick trailer of the program with you. Thank you, Yuri.
This is an amazing important role within the company.
Intense. It's like a big machine. Everyone does a different job, but everyone's job is essential.
In 2 words, it was great teamwork.
Through teamwork, you'll get there.
Teamwork.
Collaborative.
Be kind to your team members.
Because this is when the team really comes together at the beginning. And this kind of dictates how the rest of the meetings are going to go and how well you're going to work together as a team.
Anticipate and plan for every conceivable risk.
Be flexible and adaptable.
So it's a constant learning, and that will make it a great experience for you.
Okay, before they kick me out, I wanted to quickly show you how that product looks like. So there's an ebook, and this is an ebook that was inspired by Apple, just a little bit. I live close to Palo Alto, maybe that's the reason. It's of course scalable, but the point is, it's beautiful. And it has videos and pictures of our people who work in these filing teams. That was extremely appealing to our learners, I can tell you. We had a lot of videos. The ebook was developed by the very people who work in these filing teams. And if you look very carefully at this slide, you'll see the same feature you see on your iPhone. The orientation, the little dots. That's the Apple design. Just a little bit of it. And then there's a simulation. So the simulation consists of a 3-day experiential experience. It's scenario-based. There are 10 scenarios. And there's always a preparation stage. There are role plays and there are debriefs. The whole program is based on a case study, a real case study of one of our filings. There are role briefs for each of the players. And then we have observer manuals, carefully designed because senior people are observing these people. They're helping out with the role plays, and they help with the debriefs. In other words, they contribute with their technical understanding of filings as part of the program. 2 teams run through it. And what they learn from each other by doing that is not only be competitive, but also figure out how they best interact with stakeholders. Governance committees, strategic teams, and health authorities. Here's where we are now. People tell us this is really one of the most intense and most meaningful programs they experienced it. 250 people doesn't sound like a lot, but if you get the right people, this is scalable to thousands of people who are part of these filing teams. The one thing we realize is that there's a big shift in senior management and awareness and preparing people for the filings. And then what I'm really grateful for is that after 1.5 years working on this, the filing experts are still part of the delivery and the ongoing curation of that product. Today, we have more and more intact teams, so real filing teams who approach us and say, we want to make this part of our standard offering. So we see this slowly being embedded in the business process, really, which is why we build internal capabilities. And this year, we focus on the technical aspects. It's a virtual program, it's modularized, and it's supported by a mobile-based learning solution. All of this may not sound new to you, but the key point I want to make here is I do believe that we were very good in engaging the knowledge assets we have, the people and their tacit knowledge. Of course, you need a good sponsor who supports you at any point in time, and then perseverance and resilience are certainly helpful. The one thing you may want to take out of this is knowledge is all around us. The people in your companies actually have the most important knowledge for our learners. If you are able to engage them in a curation process and you keep them engaged ongoing, I think that really makes a difference in the sustainable impact of our programs. And in the end, our technology can be as fancy as you'd like it to be. But the point about technology is once you've done your homework and you get that knowledge out of people's head, you can scale it to anywhere. I don't know about you. I'm a learning expert, but I'm also a knowledge broker. Thank you so much.